Okay, let's talk about aluminum. It's a metal you probably interact with every single day without giving it a second thought. But what if I told you it might be on the verge of a massive price surge, what some are calling a structural supercycle? We're going to dig into why that is. So, the big question we're exploring here is whether aluminum is about to have its own silver moment. And honestly, the market dynamics are starting to look eerily similar to what drove that huge price surge in silver. It all boils down to a fundamental mismatch between what the world needs and what it can actually produce. All right, so let's draw that direct parallel. Silver's price basically doubled over the last year, and that move was largely chalked up to the global green energy transition. Well, guess what? A very similar story is now starting to take shape for aluminum. The reasons for silver's surge were pretty clear, right? We saw huge demand from renewable energy infrastructure, from electric vehicles, and from all the advanced tech needed for artificial intelligence. And it's this exact same industrial and technological shift that is now creating a parallel demand story for aluminum. So we've set up the comparison with silver, but what specifically is driving this new demand for aluminum? Let's break down the key sectors where we're seeing some pretty explosive growth. The single biggest driver, by far, is the electric vehicle revolution. Now, get this. A standard gas-powered car uses about 150 kilograms of aluminum. An EV, it needs 250 kilograms. That is a massive jump. And when you multiply that by the millions and millions of EVs hitting the road, the numbers just become staggering. And it's not just electric vehicles. The demand is really coming from all corners of the tech and green energy world. For solar panels, aluminum is the backbone. It's the essential structural framework. In the world of semiconductors and AI, it's absolutely critical for keeping things cool and protected. And that's not even getting into the growing demand from the aerospace industry. Okay, so we've got this perfect storm of demand building up, but here is where the story gets really, really interesting. Because on the other side of that equation, we have a major problem. The world's supply of aluminum is basically hitting a wall. If you look at the global supply chain, you'll see it's incredibly concentrated. China, all by itself, accounts for a whopping 60% of the world's primary aluminum production. That is just overwhelming dominance in the market. Right now, China's producing close to 44 million tons a year. The thing is, the country has a government-mandated production ceiling of 45 million tons, and this cap is firm. It is very unlikely to be raised, especially since their own domestic consumption is still so high. Let's just look at the raw numbers, because this is where the imbalance really starts to pop. The world is consuming 75 million tons of aluminum, and that number is growing by about 5% every single year. At the same time, the biggest producer, China, is basically maxed out. And here's the real kicker. Almost everywhere else in the world, the capacity to produce aluminum is actually going down. So you might be asking, why can't other countries just ramp up production to meet all this demand? Well, the answer comes down to one simple, massive bottleneck: electricity. Making aluminum is just incredibly energy hungry. The process is called smelting, and it's basically where you zap aluminum ore with gigantic amounts of electricity to get the pure metal. It is one of the most power-intensive things we do. The entire business model of an aluminum smelter lives or dies on the cost of electricity. Simple as that. And the history here is so important. For decades, China heavily subsidized electricity for its aluminum producers. This industrial policy made their production costs artificially low, which allowed them to just dominate the global market. Meanwhile, it became totally uneconomical for smelters in other countries to even try to compete. This sentiment right here really sums up the strategic decision that so many countries and companies made. They were faced with cheaper imports from China, and they concluded that it was just more economical to buy it from them than to produce it at home and lose money. That's what led to the supply concentration we see today. And here's what makes this whole supply crunch so critical. There really is no good substitute for aluminum. It has this incredible, unique combination of being both super light and super strong. Anything you might try to use to replace it is going to be way more expensive, much heavier, and could even make the final product less safe. So that leaves us with a really clear and pressing question. We have this unstoppable demand coming from the green energy and tech revolutions, but we have a supply that is fundamentally capped. What happens next for this irreplaceable metal? The answer is going to have huge implications for the future of our technology and, really, our planet.